The name tag slipped from my fingers the moment I saw her standing at the entrance of our 20-year high school reunion. She wore a simple black dress instead of the bright colors she used to love, and beside her stood a little girl clutching her hand with the quiet patience of someone who had already seen too much sadness for her age. Before I could even understand why my heart had begun racing, the little girl looked straight into my eyes with a strange certainty and whispered words that froze the room around me. "Mommy said you'd come." In that single moment, the years disappeared, old regrets came crashing back, and I realized that the greatest love story of my life had never truly ended, it had simply been waiting for me to find the courage to face it. Before we continue, if you believe kindness deserves another chance, if you believe that forgiveness can heal even the deepest wounds, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in hope, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us why the human heart is stronger than pain. 20 years earlier, Emily had been the kind of person who could make an ordinary afternoon feel unforgettable. She laughed with her whole heart, believed every broken thing could be repaired, and somehow convinced everyone around her that tomorrow would always be brighter. I loved her from the moment we met during our sophomore year, although I never found enough courage to say it aloud. We became best friends instead, spending endless afternoons studying beneath old oak trees, dreaming about the lives we wanted to build. Everyone assumed we would eventually fall in love, including our teachers, classmates, and even our parents. But life has a cruel way of punishing hesitation. Just before graduation, I received an unexpected scholarship thousands of miles away. Fear convinced me that chasing opportunity mattered more than risking rejection. I left without confessing what had lived inside my heart for years. By the time I realized I had made the biggest mistake of my life, Emily had already married another man. The years passed faster than I expected. Success arrived exactly the way people promised it would. I built a respected career as an architect, designed beautiful buildings, traveled across countries, and collected awards that looked impressive on office shelves but felt strangely empty whenever I returned home. Friends married, raised families, and celebrated birthdays surrounded by children. I attended weddings carrying expensive gifts and returned to silent apartments where only the ticking clock welcomed me. Occasionally I searched Emily's name online, never daring to send a message. I saw photographs of birthdays, vacations, anniversaries, and finally one small picture of a newborn daughter wrapped in a pink blanket. She looked happy, and I convinced myself that loving someone sometimes meant accepting that their happiness belonged to another story. When the invitation for our reunion arrived, I almost threw it away. I had skipped every previous reunion because I wasn't ready to reopen old memories. Something about turning 40 made the past feel heavier than before. Maybe I wanted proof that my choices had been worth the sacrifices. Maybe I simply wanted one last glimpse of the life I had imagined but never lived. The ballroom shimmered with soft lights and familiar faces aged by time yet recognizable through old smiles. Friends hugged one another, laughed about forgotten adventures, and compared photographs of children preparing for college. The room overflowed with joyful noise until the entrance doors quietly opened. Emily walked inside. For a second I barely recognized her. The sparkle in her eyes had been replaced by quiet resilience. The woman who once laughed louder than anyone else now smiled gently, as though happiness had become something precious she handled with care. There was no wedding ring on her hand. Instead, she wore a thin silver necklace with a tiny cross resting against her heart. Beside her stood the little girl whose bright blue eyes looked remarkably familiar. Then came those unforgettable words. "Mommy said you'd come." Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment, almost embarrassed by the child's honesty, before offering me a tired smile that somehow carried 20 years of unfinished conversations. We embraced awkwardly, not as former lovers, because we had never officially become that, but as two people realizing that time had stolen possibilities neither of them could ever recover. Throughout the evening we spoke in quiet corners while music played in the background. She told me that her husband, Daniel, had been a wonderful man who loved both her and their daughter with complete devotion. 3 years earlier, a drunk driver had taken his life while he was returning home after buying birthday decorations for their little girl's 5th birthday. In one terrible night, every certainty she had built disappeared. She became both mother and father, carrying grief while pretending to be strong enough for a frightened little girl who kept asking when Daddy would wake up. Listening to her story felt like carrying stones inside my chest. I realized that life had never rewarded or punished people according to what they deserved. Good people suffered. Loving families broke apart. Dreams ended without warning. Before leaving that night, Emily handed me a folded envelope. She explained that she had almost thrown it away many times but somehow never could. Inside was a letter dated 20 years earlier, written in handwriting I immediately recognized as hers. She confessed that she had loved me back. She had waited until graduation, hoping I would tell her how I felt. When I left without saying goodbye properly, she believed I had chosen a future that didn't include her. Broken-hearted and convinced I had never loved her at all, she eventually accepted Daniel's proposal. She admitted she never regretted marrying him because he gave her genuine happiness, but she also admitted that a small part of her had always wondered what might have happened if two frightened young people had simply been honest. I sat alone in my car long after the reunion ended, unable to stop crying. Not because I had lost Emily again, but because I had finally learned how expensive silence could become. The following weekend I received an unexpected phone call. Emily's daughter wanted help building a model bridge for a school science project. Emily admitted she remembered I used to build miniature structures from popsicle sticks during school competitions. It sounded like such a simple request that I almost laughed through my tears. That afternoon changed everything. The little girl, Lily, welcomed me as though I had always belonged in their home. She proudly showed me drawings covering the refrigerator, introduced me to every stuffed animal, and insisted I taste cookies she had helped bake. Children possess a remarkable ability to see people without judging their complicated histories. To Lily, I wasn't a stranger carrying old regrets. I was simply the man her mother smiled differently around. Weeks slowly became months. I repaired broken shelves, helped with homework, attended school performances, and quietly stepped into moments where an extra pair of hands made life easier. I never tried replacing Daniel because nobody could. Instead, I simply became someone willing to carry a small portion of the weight Emily had been carrying alone. One rainy evening, after helping Lily finish a history assignment, Emily confessed something that changed the way I understood the reunion. Months before accepting the invitation, she had found our old yearbook while cleaning the attic. Inside it was a faded photograph of us laughing beneath the same oak tree where we used to study. Lily asked who the smiling young man was. Emily answered honestly, explaining that once upon a time she had loved someone she never had the chance to be with. The little girl asked one innocent question. Will I ever meet him? Emily had smiled sadly and answered, maybe one day. If we're lucky, he'll come. That was why Lily had recognized me immediately at the reunion. Not because she somehow knew me. Because she had been waiting too. Life continued weaving quiet miracles. Birthdays became shared celebrations. Christmas mornings included extra presents beneath the tree. Family photographs gradually placed me closer and closer to Emily until one afternoon Lily absent-mindedly asked whether she could introduce me as part of her family during a school event. The question wasn't dramatic. It was soft, innocent, and completely sincere. Emily looked at me with tears shining in her eyes. Neither of us answered immediately. Some questions deserve silence because the heart needs time to catch up with hope. Months later, we visited Daniel's grave together. Emily placed fresh flowers beside the headstone while Lily carefully arranged painted stones she had decorated herself. I stood respectfully a few steps behind them until Emily reached for my hand. There was no jealousy, no guilt, and no attempt to erase the past. Love doesn't replace love. Hearts simply grow large enough to carry both memory and new beginnings. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emily finally admitted that she had spent years believing happiness belonged only to her past. Meeting me again reminded her that healing wasn't betrayal. It was gratitude for having survived. A year after the reunion, surrounded by close friends and family beneath the same ancient oak tree where our friendship had first begun, I asked Emily to marry me. There were no expensive fireworks or dramatic speeches. There were only honest tears, trembling hands, and one little girl cheering louder than everyone else as her mother whispered yes. The happiest moment didn't arrive when Emily accepted my proposal. It arrived seconds later. Lily hugged both of us so tightly that none of us could speak. She looked up with joyful eyes and quietly said she had always known this day would come because Mommy never stopped believing that some people are simply meant to find each other, even if life makes them take the longest road possible. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that hope sometimes arrives years later than expected, but it still arrives. Before we reach the ending, please leave a comment below and tell us, do you believe true love can find its way back, even after many years? We'd love to read your thoughts. Today our home is filled with laughter again. Daniel's photographs remain on the living room shelf because love should never erase gratitude. Lily is growing into the same kind-hearted young woman her mother once was, and every time she laughs, I remember the frightened little girl who stood at the reunion entrance believing a promise only her mother understood. Sometimes I wonder what life would have looked like if I had confessed my feelings all those years ago. But regret no longer controls me. Instead, it reminds me never to leave important words unspoken again. Life rarely gives second chances, yet sometimes, through unimaginable pain and unexpected grace, it quietly places them back into our hands. All we have to do is recognize them before fear convinces us to walk away once more. That night at our reunion, I thought I was returning to remember the past. I never imagined I was actually walking toward the family that had been waiting for me all along.